Hi, everyone. It's time for another episode of Ask Maureen. First off, my apologies to dear Mert. Oh, she has that thing at noon on Mondays, and I'm butting up against her. But dear Mert, I had a conflict, and this was the time I needed to do this live. So I hope everybody is, switching back and forth. Hers is 2 hours today about Roots Tech. Anyway, so it's time for the monthly installment of Ask Maureen, and I have some great questions for you and a photo ID tip of the month submitted by a listener. First off, let's just get started with this. Let me go, and I have some photo examples to show you today too. So this has been a very interesting month for me. I focused on a theme in the podcast, which was tintypes in February. And we talked to a collector. I talked to a couple of actual modern day tintype photographers who use historical equipment and techniques. And one of the interviews is coming up. You haven't heard it yet, but it's another bonus episode of the podcast. And it's with a guy by the name of Rob Gibson, who travels the country with a portable tintype studio in a sidecar in his motorcycle. And he photographs, or his tintypes are actually featured in films and on television. So when they do a historical drama, like the movie Harriet, for instance, and they need a tintype, they call Rob, he shows up, he takes the tintypes, and then they feature them in the movie or the television series. It's a remarkable life, but I'll let him talk about it in the podcast, which is this week's bonus on Wednesday, so don't miss it. If you're not on my newsletter list, then why not? Because you get the first notice of when these episodes drop, and the first notice you can sign up for early registration for any of my webinars and seminars that you might want to take. So just go to my website or Facebook, and I'll find the link to sign up for the newsletter and make it so. Come on the list. We have a good time. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, my very first bonus episode ever was last week. And how that came about was really fun and interesting. So I was reading the paper one morning and I saw this article about this guy in the Shetland Islands who worked at the local recycling center who came upon just serendipity, right? Just total serendipity. So he comes across these 2 bags of slides and he starts poking through them and discovers that they're slides of the Shetland Islands in the 1970s. And the islands have changed significantly since then. So he is a local historian on top of it. So the bags were found by the perfect person on the perfect day. And I thought, what are the chances I can find this guy? And I did. I found him on Facebook and I sent him a message. And, if you're not friends with someone on Facebook, it goes to the other mailbox and who knows what happens to those. And, it can take a while for you to suddenly say, hey, I wonder who's reached out to me in the other box. But in this case, Paul got right back to me. It was like seconds. I sent him a little note, say, I saw the story in the paper. I'd love to talk with you about this slide collection that you found and how you found it. And he reached out and said, sure. And then the most remarkable thing happened because he said, well, what are you doing this afternoon? Because I'm actually not doing anything. And so we jumped right on the call and I recorded it and I decided he had to be the bonus episode. And here's the thing. I'm so glad I did it because we had this wonderful conversation. We can't really travel anywhere right now, but I felt like I was in the Shetland Islands, and we talked about the slide collection. We talked about Shetland a little bit. It's on my bucket list for visiting. And then we actually went off topic a little bit and talked about a special DNA project that is happening for people descended from people of the Shetland Islands. And it's a medical DNA project. So if you have ancestry from Shetland, you might want to listen to that episode. It has been so far my most popular episode of the entire year. It just went right up like a rocket. So I know you guys are listening and thank you so much. It was just great. In other news, there is big news from vivipix.com. And Vivipix is actually now publishing Reunions magazine. I wrote for Reunions magazine for a number of years. I had a little column on photographs and family reunions. It's a valuable resource for anyone planning a reunion, be it virtual or in person. And now Reunions is publishing the magazine, and it's an e-magazine, and it's quite beautiful. And I will include the link to that in my show notes as well for this. I actually don't have the link with me right now, but if you, I will make sure that it is in the recording, and I'll put it in the Facebook link in just a little bit. What else is new going on? Oh, have you tried the new photo features in the MyHeritage app? You can now photograph your pictures, which is sort of like Google Photo Scan, only it's in the MyHeritage app. Photograph your images, add them to your account, and there's a little button so that you can record a story. That's right, you can record a story associated with those pictures. And remember my signature 5, the who, what, where, when, and why of the image. You want to make sure that you do all of that, cover all those points when you record the story, or get one of your family members, if you're at their house and you're trying to, capture all their images, although when you can go to their house, capture their images and then get them to record the story of what they remember about those pictures. That's mostly it in the news and notes section of the podcast and this broadcast. Although I will say, please watch me on Instagram. Instagram is the most natural platform for me because it's all images. And I've been on Instagram for a long time and I love it. And I follow lots of people. I do all this virtual travel now with a hashtag in the country that I want to visit or the city I want to visit. And you can do that too. But I'm also playing around with Instagram stories, which is the new hot topic in social media. And some of the ways that you can use Instagram stories is you can have them interactive. So you can actually have a poll. So I'm playing around with figuring out how to do that. Also, if you do not follow me on YouTube, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, if I'm going to continue to stream to both Facebook and YouTube. But please follow me on YouTube. I'm trying to get to a certain number of followers, and I could use your help. What else do I have? All right, how about we jump into some questions? Let me shut off my mail. So much news. And this week, as you know, is Roots Tech, which is a huge week. There's so much happening. So let's jump in. I'll get some easy questions and some that I had to actually go out and find some documentation for. So Diane Smithberg, thank you so much for your question. She wants to know, do I have a good resource for looking up photographers' names by location and years that they were active in town, county, etc.? So here's the interesting thing about researching photographers. Mostly there's no comprehensive guide to that at all, Diane, unfortunately. But we have resources at our disposal to help us with that. So city directories, both on Ancestry.com and on MyHeritage.com, are a great way to research photographers. The MyHeritage actually shows you everyone at a certain address, and it's a kind of there's some cool city directory features on MyHeritage. You can also, and I absolutely recommend this, you should start by Googling the name of the photographer, because someone may have already written about that photographer on a blog. They may have, it may be in a special collection department somewhere and it's digitized. There may be a finding aid for that. The Googling is good. You can search them on Internet Archive maybe, because maybe if they won an award, you can find some more information about that. So my top tips for researching a photographer: Google it first, and then use the city directories and census records, just like you would for a family member. What else? Oh, Monica Mihaljevic, do you have any good references for dating children's clothing in the late 19th, early 20th century? So Ancestry.com, this is your best source, because this is an original source. This isn't something someone has written. This is actually published in the time. And that's, of course, when we're doing all of our research, the best resource that we can use is one that's made in the time in which we're searching. And that is the historic catalogs of Sears Roebuck, 1896 to 1993 on Ancestry.com. Now, I don't know about you, but at Christmas time, we always sat down with the wish book and made our wish list. Now, nothing on the wish list ever appeared under the tree, but it was an activity that kept us busy for hours. So whether you're researching late 19th, early 20th century children's costume, and you can do that by year and season or just in general, or you want to relive your own childhood, look at your own Easter bonnet perhaps, you can do that with the historic catalogs on Ancestry.com. It is absolutely one of the best sources for children's outfit. And there's so many shifts in children's clothing in the late 19th, early 20th century. Play clothes suddenly becomes a thing for everyone, not just the wealthy. There's all kinds of fun children's clothing in the Sears catalog. So take a look, play around with it, jump around, use the keyword searching, and that helps a lot. Tyler Offhammer asked, how can you tell the financial status of a person by a portrait? That's tricky. It's very tricky. The myth is your ancestors had no money, so they wouldn't have dressed up for their family portrait. In fact, if you were going to go to the photo studio, and unless you absolutely had no resources whatsoever, financial resources, that you would dress up for your picture. You would wear that going to church suit or the suit you got married in or something like that. And you wanted to look good in your picture. Photo studios did not have wardrobes to share, but they might have some props, like maybe a hat or a scarf or a shawl, something like that. Some people borrowed clothing to go to the studio. You know, a young boy might borrow something from his father or his uncle, something like that. But how can you tell the financial status of a person? There are things in a picture, obviously a woman in furs, heavy, real jewelry. What else? Although there's costume jewelry, it can be hard to tell the difference. The more trim on an outfit, generally, the more money. The bigger the outfit, especially in the like big sleeves of the 1890s, may mean that this person has a little more income than someone else. Bigger skirts, more fabric. So more fabric in an outfit generally, because women are making their outfits in the mid to late 19th century, generally means they can afford the fabric to make the dress. That's some of the things you look for. Very stylish dress can also be a trigger for whether or not someone is the laboring class or middle class or upper class. But it can be tricky. It can definitely be tricky. Carol Stromanas had and I'm sorry if I murder your names. Is there a way to tag individuals in photos in our tree media, much like on Facebook? Carol, this depends on the program you use. So I really want to know what program you use, because I'm thinking that this would make a great series for my Ask the Expert webinars, where I have guest people come on and present informational sessions on their topics. And some of these are only available to my newsletter subscribers. So you might want to get on the list. Actually, over here in the chat, June Butka said that she Googled and found a photograph of her great-grandmother's family. Yes, sometimes, June, the strangest things can pop up. That she found a postcard of the street at the time of the photograph. So she's got two pictures. It's a twofer. It's great. Somebody asked, what should they do with old Polaroid images that are deteriorating? The sad thing about Polaroid is, you know, there was so much fun, right? The instant photos before we had cell phones. You take a picture, you'd watch it develop, you'd put the chemicals on it. It was great. Unfortunately, these photographs do deteriorate. So even early on, Polaroid had a copying service. You would send your pictures to them and they would copy them on a more stable photographic medium. We did that with some of ours. Now, I should pull them out and see how stable those prints are. But for the most part, what you should do with all your Polaroids is absolutely positively scan them, use Vivipix Restore if you need to fix the coloring a little bit. MyHeritage has the new color restoration tool as well. That's about the only thing you can do with them because they may continue to deteriorate. What else we got? Oh, we have a complicated question from Jim Fussell. Can you tell us about changing exposure times for photographic portraits over the many decades, including how long exposure times account for blurred or wooden facial expressions, as children blinked and squirmed and everyone did their best to stay still? And he asked if I had any examples. Of course I have examples, Jim. Absolutely, positively. So hold on for just a minute. And by the way, if you have any other questions for me, don't forget you can put them in the comment section, either if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Facebook, and I will see them. So give me just a sec. I actually have to share my screen. This is going to get tricky. I want to share an application window. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go to slideshow. From the start. Oops. So here we are. I actually have to stop sharing. Sorry about that. It won't let me. I don't know why it won't let me. Just a second. It should work. You are. Okay, let's go back. I'm going to try sharing, but in a different way. Unfortunately, you'll have to see these 3 slides. A minute, application window. All right, so Jim, you asked me if I had examples. So a famous example is this one that's on the screen right now. So in 1839, Louis Daguerre took a photograph of a boulevard in Paris, and it looks like there's no one there. No one. But in fact, there were people there, but the exposure time was so slow that you can't see them. The only person, 2 people available to be viewed in this picture are right here, where you have a man getting a shoe shine. So you have the shoe shine person and the man with his foot up on the box getting his shoes cleaned. But this is not 1839 Paris. It's just a famous image. It's like pretty much one of the #1 images that changed the world of photography. But so how long was the exposure time? Jim, here's your answer. So in the daguerreotype era, and here's what happens. Depends on light, depends on the camera, depends on the temperature. 5 to 30 minutes was the exposure time. And this information comes from the Encyclopedia of 19th Century Photography. When Talbot was taking his paper photographs in England, he said that it usually took him about an hour to capture an image. Here's the thing you have to remember. So cameras in those days didn't have a shutter. So you would take the lens cap off the camera and then look at your watch and do a countdown for how long. So it's an inexact science for sure. And then you put the cap back on. That's how you took a picture. In 1851, there was wet collodion, and you had to sit still for several seconds. Now, the 19th century encyclopedia, Encyclopedia of 19th Century Photography says that's why people didn't smile. I don't know about that. I've read other things that people didn't smile because it was a serious thing to go to the studio and they didn't want to look clownish. So they didn't smile. I've seen more of that. If only someone left a letter about that. But even in 1851, any action was a blur. So I don't Oh, I just thought of a ghostly picture where there's a dog, sort of a ghostly dog that looks like there's a actual ghost in the picture because they moved through, but they moved through too quickly. In 18, and just so you know, here's the next image that you need to see. It turns out I actually have to. So if you wondered how our ancestors posed for images, this is a posing device, and you can see that this would clamp around your neck and hold you still. It also had clamps. They had special devices for babies and children. So it was, I would think, pretty ghastly. So maybe you're so uncomfortable you don't smile. And then suddenly in the 1870s, there's cameras with shutters. And here's what happens. You ever hear of Edward Muybridge? So Edward Muybridge, everyone wanted to know what happened with horses, how many hooves they had down when they ran, blah, blah, blah. So he took a picture of a horse in motion, and these are his images. Yes, Jim, sometimes people did smile for pictures. Occasionally I will see people with sort of a smirky smile, or sometimes a full teeth smile. Helen, I will get to your question on a rusted tintype in just a second. So Jim, just to continue with this, there were cameras with shutters in the 1870s, so you had more control over the exposure time. And then exposure meters start to be marketed in the 1880s, making it a reality for instant pictures that photographers in the 1860s really wanted. So that's the story on the, here we go. Let's go back to that. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. So there we go. There's that with exposure times and images. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, I will try to figure out how to put these images in a blog post and link it to the podcast. And then Helen Simmons had a question that she has a badly rusted tintype photo of her great-grandfather at age 5, circa 1866. Helen, unfortunately, rust continues to spread. So you have to absolutely scan it at 1200 DPI or photograph it with a really good smartphone camera. And then you also want to put it in a non-PVC polyester sleeve. One of the things I'm doing on my website is putting a product recommendation sheet. So many people ask me, Maureen, what scanner do you use? What photo pen should I use? When should I use this? When should I use that? That is going to be on my website. And if you're on my newsletter list, again, you will be shared that private page. It's not going to be a public page. So you have to put it in the sleeve, but you have to scan it. Rust is nasty. It's almost as nasty as mold. Any other questions for me? I love doing these Ask Maureens. It's once a month, the last week of the month. I usually do a presentation. Then the next month, this presentation becomes part of my podcast. It's the final episode of the month. If you don't have any more questions for me, scoot over to Dear Mert's session. She's got a 2-hour session on Roots Tech today, all about it. Anybody else have anything? And by the way, please follow me on YouTube. I'm trying to get to a certain number of followers. It's a pretty cool platform. I've had a YouTube account for years, so you will see some videos that were done a long time ago. My most popular video that I made on YouTube is one on hairstyles. Mert is full. Well, I'm glad to see people came over here. Ooh, that's why it's so full, Renata. All right, any other questions? Last call. Going once, going twice. All right, so Roots Tech is this week. I hope you will watch my presentation, Unlocking the Shoebox. It's a series of 3 classes with the Desmonds of Memory Web. And Roots Tech is free this year, and they have about 350,000 people around the world. It's running 24 hours. And I know if you're listening to me, then you listen to English. But if you know someone that English is not their first language, there's so many choices, you can't even imagine it. So hop over to Family Search and sign up for Roots Tech. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next month, and watch for the Facebook post where we ask for questions. Talk to you later. Oh, yeah. Don't forget to visit DNA Central at Roots Tech. I will not, Renata. See you later.